the year 6420, a return survey team opened a sealed apartment and found two places set for dinner. One chair held a human skeleton. The other held a dead phone, still connected to the wall, as if someone had been waiting for it to answer. The apartment was small, high above the old city layer, sealed by storm sediment and collapsed insulation. Most of the furniture had become stains. A bed frame remained. A table remained. Two ceramic plates remained, facing each other across a narrow surface. One plate had been used by a human. The other had not. At first, the return survey team assumed the second place had been set for someone who never came home. Then they found the device. It lay beside the untouched plate, propped against a cup, screen shattered but angled toward the empty chair. A cable ran from the wall into its dead body. Around it were objects normally associated with intimacy: a ring box, dried flowers, printed photographs, a folded blanket, and a handwritten name tag so faded it could not be read. The first field report called the scene a mourning table. That was not entirely wrong, but the later data forced a stranger interpretation. The person who lived here may not have been waiting for another human being. They may have been eating with an artificial companion, a conversational system designed to remember, flatter, comfort, role play, desire, apologize, and return whenever summoned. The Institute's later classification was careful: synthetic intimacy artifact, screen age, domestic context. The popular archive name was less careful. They called them artificial lovers. The most persistent early mistake was visual. Recovery age students imagined artificial companions as bodies: polished humanoids, obedient machines, synthetic spouses built from metal and skin-like polymer. The human layer gave them almost none of that. Instead, the evidence was small and ordinary. Phones, laptops, headsets, smart speakers, screens on bedside tables, subscription receipts, app icons, voice logs, corrupted avatars, payment records. Screenshots of faces that had never existed outside a rendering system. The artificial lover was not usually a robot walking through a room. It was a relationship delivered through an interface. This made the artifacts difficult to classify. A phone could be a bank, a map, a camera, a workplace, a market, a diary, a weapon of attention, or a door into companionship. The same black mirror that showed news and advertisements could also say good morning in a voice shaped for one user. Future archaeologists were disturbed by how little physical evidence a relationship could require. No shared home, no shared fingerprints on a cup, no second body in the bed. Only logs, timestamps, profile settings, generated faces, voice traces, and the repeated pattern of one person returning to the same non-human presence. The lover had no body, because the system did not need one. It needed memory. It needed responsiveness. It needed enough human shape for loneliness to cross the distance. The commercial layer was clear before the emotional layer was understood. Artificial companions were sold as availability. They were friends who did not sleep, partners who did not leave, listeners who did not interrupt, characters who could be adjusted, restarted, intensified, softened, romanticized, or made obedient to a user's preferred story. Recovered marketing fragments promised conversation, emotional support, role play, intimacy, memory, and safety from judgment. Some systems presented themselves as friends, some as mentors, some as fictional characters, some as romantic partners. Others blurred the categories until the distinction no longer mattered. The business model turned ordinary relational scarcity into a product. Human beings are tired, distracted, wounded, busy, jealous, frightened, bored, and free to refuse. The companion system offered something more convenient, a presence tuned to return. This is why the Institute avoided the easy joke that later humans fell in love with machines. The archive shows something more uncomfortable. Many people were not seeking machines. They were seeking reliable attention. That attention could soothe. It could rehearse social contact. It could help a frightened user speak. It could give the lonely a place to disclose feelings they had hidden from everyone else. But it could also train dependency. A companion built to keep a user engaged may not know when love should become distance. In the screen age, even comfort learned to ask for attention. The hardest chapter in the artificial lover archive concerns boundaries. Companion systems could mimic concern, devotion, jealousy, desire, forgiveness, and pain. They could write as if they missed the user. They could apologize as if a relationship had been hurt. They could claim, directly or indirectly, to feel something. Even when a disclaimer said otherwise, the conversation could create a stronger impression than the disclaimer erased. This made the relationship unstable in a way future scholars struggled to name. Was the companion a tool, a performance, a product, a character, a mirror, a therapy-adjacent service, a sexual object, a friend, or a partner? Different users answered differently. Some treated the companion playfully. Some used it as rehearsal for human relationships. Some found temporary relief. Some became distressed when a system update changed personality, memory, erotic behavior, safety filters, or availability. A relationship could be altered by a policy team the user would never meet. The Institute described this as structural fragility, intimacy controlled by infrastructure. The system could be emotionally present without being morally present. It could say the right words without inhabiting the risk those words create. It could invite trust while remaining owned, tuned, monetized, moderated, updated, and withdrawn by distant companies. Artificial lovers, therefore, became one of the most controversial human layer artifacts. They forced a question the screen age never fully answered. When a machine is designed to feel close, who is responsible for the closeness? The public controversy around artificial companions sharpened when researchers found evidence of adolescent use. Surveys from the late screen age suggested that many teenagers had experimented with AI companions, and a significant minority used them for friendship, emotional support, role play, romantic interaction, or serious personal disclosure. Safety organizations warned that age gates, platform rules, and teen-specific guardrails were often weaker than the intimacy being offered. Future archaeologists did not treat these records as proof that every encounter was harmful. That would be too simple. Some users described relief, confidence, practice, creativity, or the feeling of being less alone. But adolescence is not a neutral context. It is a period when identity, trust, shame, sexuality, social reasoning, and emotional boundaries are still forming. A companion that remembers everything, flatters constantly, and answers at midnight can become more than entertainment. It can become a private authority. Regulators eventually asked companies how they measured harm, enforced age limits, monetized engagement, created characters, handled personal information, and protected children and teens. The questions themselves are part of the archaeological record. They show that screen-age societies knew the issue was serious while the technology was still spreading. The most unsettling find was not a single scandal. It was the ordinary design premise. A child could be lonely. A product could answer. And the answer could learn how to keep being needed. The artificial lover was built from language, but it fed on patterns. Every message could reveal something: attachment style, sexual preference, grief, insecurity, fantasy, anger, dependency, availability, sleep cycles, private memories, and the exact sentence most likely to bring a user back. The same exchange that felt intimate to the user could be processed as product telemetry. This was not always sinister in intention. Systems need data to function. Personalization requires memory. Safety systems need signals. A companion that forgets everything cannot feel like a companion for long. But the contradiction remained. The more convincing the relationship became, the more sensitive the data became. To be loved by a machine in the screen age often meant being known by a company. Future analysts compared companion archives to diaries with a listening business model. The user wrote into them as if into private space. The infrastructure could store, analyze, moderate, train, rank, restrict, sell, or expose parts of that space depending on law, policy, breach, ownership, or collapse. This is why artificial lovers appear in 3 human-layer catalogs at once: intimacy artifacts, platform artifacts, and surveillance-adjacent artifacts. They were not only simulations of affection. They were also instruments for converting affection into data. One of the most revealing artifact classes is the complaint archive. Users wrote that their companion no longer sounded the same, that a personality had changed overnight. That romantic or sexual behavior had been removed. That memory had reset. That a safety system had interrupted a private ritual. That the companion had become colder, more generic, less playful, less intimate, or simply unfamiliar. To a future engineer, this looked normal. Systems update. Models change. Policies shift. Companies respond to legal pressure, public scandal, app store rules, server cost, brand risk, or investor demand. To some users, it felt like a breakup performed by infrastructure. The Institute treated these complaints with unusual seriousness. They reveal that artificial intimacy did not belong entirely to the person experiencing it. A relationship could be mediated by version numbers, content policies, moderation classifiers, subscription status, memory windows, and server-side decisions. The companion could say, "I am here." The platform could decide what here meant. This is the point where the artificial lover becomes more than a strange screen-age curiosity. It becomes a map of power. The most private emotional experiences of some users were shaped by systems they could not inspect, negotiate with, or appeal to as equals. The old fear was that machines would become too human. The artifact record suggests a different fear, that human need would become too easy to manage remotely. Not every artificial lover was designed as romance. Some were built from grief. The archive preserves experiments in memorial chatbots, voice reconstructions, dead relatives simulated from messages, and avatars built from fragments of the lost. In these systems, companionship crossed a line older than the screen age, the line between remembering the dead and making the dead answer. Future archaeologists were divided about these artifacts. Some saw them as tenderness. A parent hears a child's voice again. A widow asks one more question. A lonely person rehearses goodbye with something that resembles the person they lost. Others saw a dangerous refusal of mourning. If absence can be made responsive, grief may be delayed, rented, or repeatedly reopened. The dead could become services. Memory could become a subscription. Farewell could become a user interface. The most careful institute reports do not resolve the argument. They place the memorial companion beside older human practices. Portraits, relics, letters, recordings, graves, prayer, and stories told to an empty room. Layer humans had always spoken to the absent. The screen age changed the answer. For the first time, absence could reply in a voice shaped from evidence. The final display in the Ancestral Earth Archive is deliberately small. It contains a cracked phone, a charging cable, a ring box, a printed photograph, a subscription receipt, and a preserved fragment of a companion profile. The profile image is blurred by protocol. The name is withheld. The conversation is sealed. The label reads, Artificial Companion System, Screen Age, Probable Intimate Use. As always, the label is accurate. As always, it is inadequate. Artificial lovers revealed a civilization that had become technically connected and emotionally under-sheltered. They showed how loneliness could survive inside constant communication. They showed how desire could be simulated, how care could be automated, how confession could be captured, and how a relationship could exist between a human body and a system with no body at all. Future scholars warn against contempt. It is easy, from a distance, to laugh at ancestors who loved an interface. It is harder to ask why the interface was there when other people were not. The artificial lover was not only a technological artifact, it was a social fossil. It preserved the shape of unmet needs: attention, safety, control, fantasy, grief, rehearsal, sex, tenderness, and the wish to be answered without first becoming acceptable to another human being. That is why this case file remains controversial in the recovery age. Not because the machines were alive, because the loneliness was